And we are live, but wow, we are not really off to an awesome start in terms of our approach at the moment. Hi, this is me, John Reed. I'm waiting on Brian Summer. He had a technical problem, and we're starting a little bit late. So please chime in the chat and say hi. We will be getting going in just a minute. We got the slide deck. Let's give Brian another shot. Hi, Brian.
Hey,
Hey, Brian, we're already live, man. How about that? Show
well,
business. It's going
I
really
already
smooth.
did. I already did all my waiting time backstage.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
on a bad
yeah.
link, but anyway,
Sorry,
I'm
sorry to keep the talent waiting there.
here.
So glad,
Yeah.
so glad you're back though. Brian, we are live, and I'm sorry that we had a couple of snafus there, but my internet was down, and so I had to improvise. But anyway, we're here. Brian, I made a couple small adjustments to our deck. Just FYI, I pulled a couple stories to the rear, but otherwise, it's as you sent it to me. So here we are. And if you are in the chat, come say hi. We're glad to see you. And sorry, we're starting a little bit weird, but yeah, Brent, it's showtime, and I know you've been here before with the oh crap, we're live. Well, we are live, Brian. Let's have a look at the agenda because Brian, you and I have had our share of tarmac indignities, and we are bringing nuggets of incisive knowledge.
Yeah, we're going to hit those hard in the halftime section unless you move that around.
No, it's still there.
And I'll tell you what, every phone call I have with John, throughout the month, one of us is clearly having a better day or whatever traveling, and the other one certainly is on the far opposite extreme of things.
Taking it
So,
on the chin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
wait,
we're not going to do the special on predictions episode. We got to remember to move that from the agenda slide, but we
oh
will.
yeah,
Uh, uh, but Greg, hey, yeah, syncing with Wi-Fi. Yeah, it's oh, syncing with LinkedIn. Yeah. Don't try that, man. Just pick one or the other. Oh, hey Volker, how you doing? Nice to see you this afternoon. You're actually up in the evening to catch this action. We really appreciate you being here. Feel free to chime in with your observations.
and guten Abend. Well, our typical agenda is kind of what we're following today. We're going to go through the cringy buzzword or overhyped tech. We're going to talk about each of us picks up a couple of different underrated enterprise stories. Because I put the deck together, I kind of have a clue what John might be talking about, but I'm guessing we won't even make it 5 minutes and John's going to blow a head gasket here. So let's just see what kind of time and table it takes. For the halftime bill, we are going to speak about uh, it's more than just travel related stuff. We're going to talk about things that we're not thrilled about from what vendors are or aren't sharing with us when we're on the road. And then we've got some couple of whiffs and humorous aside points that we'll cover. And obviously, we'd love to have all your comments. I think we're not going to run a special guest today, but if you've got something particularly pithy or whatever, definitely put it in the comments. And who knows, John, I'm sure will be flashing lots of comments up throughout the podcast. And maybe for that one special person who's maybe got a jacket and tie on, maybe we can just plug them in if
We might even pull you on stage if you have something that we really want to share. Hey, Christopher. Hey, nice to see you. Thanks for joining.
yep.
Yeah. I think LinkedIn might have swapped up their algo a little bit to give us some fresh viewers. That's kind of nice. Yeah. Buckle up, indeed, Brent. So yeah. And by the way, Greg, I can see your YouTube comments, so you can stay there. You're just missing out on a little bit of the community experience, but you may be better off there, given trying to sync those two things. And Brian's dog is going to make sure the show stays on track. Brian, overhyped tech.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always astounded at the new junk that vendors come out. Let's go to that next slide. Let's see what's new this in the last few weeks. There were three things there. I know a lot of you already been using the word work slop. I thought this, the fact that it got defined and, by, of all places, Harvard Business Review just really legitimizes that term. There's Shrim over here came up with something called skill fishing, which made me think we need to have skill chumming, skill casting, skill trolling, skill netting, and all kinds of other, skill related adaptations from that. And then, oh boy, thanks, Brent. And
Brent,
then,
I don't have any pistachios today, man. Sorry, I used those up in Atlanta, but there'll be more. I'm sure I'll have another great Southwest experience in my future to bolster my pistachio collection. Sorry, Brian. On with your
oh
skills
no,
related buzzword.
I actually had a couple of good Southwest experiences this week as well, but I didn't get any pistachios on any of those segments, so I must not live as well as you do. And finally, I want to definitely give a big credit to Evan Greenberg, the founder and chief top guy down there at NetSuite. He had a word he used a couple times in a briefing with us: decomplexify. And I didn't even know that decomplex was even a word or a verb. And anyway, but to decomplexify, I've got to add that to the lexicon of great tech words.
Yeah, I think Chris makes a good point here around the work slop is a whitewashing of garbage in, garbage out. Indeed. In fact, Chris, I think you nailed one of the key themes of our show. So well done. You're on it early.
Take it
So
away, John, with the first of your picks for the article of the month.
right. So this one is all about context, and we've been talking about context a lot, haven't we? We're going to hear this word until our ears say enough this spring. But but there was a jump start some weeks ago when Foundation Capital published the context graphs or $1 trillion opportunity post, which was fundamentally a bit of a critique of enterprise software, in particular systems of record. It's a really interesting critique. I don't totally agree with it. I think they're very startup oriented, and they're really into AI disruption, right? But what was interesting was Aaron Levy's response, which is up here, the future of enterprise software, which he posted on X. And Aaron Levy is obviously the CEO of Box, and has done a really good job, I think, of kind of straddling the fence between startup outlooks on this and enterprise outlooks. And the gist of it is that when you take a step back, okay, why are we talking about context so much? We're talking about it because basically what enterprises are finding and what vendors are finding is that if you don't provide agents with proper context, proper data that informs the specific situation they're looking at with the proper governance and privacy packaging and all of that, you're either going to get inaccurate, flawed, uh, 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 unauthorized information, or some horrible combination of all of that. And so that's why context is really picking up steam at the moment. And so this debate just sheds some light on that. But one of the things Foundation Capital is talking about that I think is really interesting is that context is also an opportunity, because what it is, and Brian, you and I maybe talk about this later in the show a little bit, context, and forget about the graphs, okay? Context, it doesn't necessarily have to be a graph. Like you're basically looking at large language models and agents that need some help. They need some sources of truth from somewhere that they're not trained on. And it's a lot of times a knowledge graph or a so-called context graph is a good place to put it. Some people are talking about agentic memory, but basically you're compensating for some of the underlying limitations of the LLM architecture. And the point is that one of the opportunities there, Foundation Capital talks a lot about decision traces. And their point is that all across the enterprise, people are having conversations in their Slack channels, for example, amongst sales reps, or you're trying to deal with a supply chain problem. And that context is more fresh and relevant than a lot of your enterprise data. So basically, the bottom line is that the interesting thing is to rethink, what does the decision maker need to make a decision in a given moment? And what they need is some combination of quality, this is my opinion, quality enterprise data, quality data from more unstructured enterprise interactions like chats or what have you, and a lot of times external data. So, for example, demographic data, up-to-date weather data. For supply chain management, you often need port-related data to know where the hell your stuff is, which is one of the thorniest enterprise problems to this day across the so-called supply chain. So the point is, context discussions create an opportunity for that. But the other final point is that a lot of times you do need a different type of data architecture. So it's not just about data quality. It's about how do you serve the variety of data up to a point that someone can really consume it within an agent. And the final thing I want to say about it that's driving me nuts, Brian,
Oh boy, here comes the meltdown. All right.
is that context is not intelligence. Context approximates relevance for your situation in that moment if you get it right, but it's fragile. It can lose itself. It can become corrupted. It can become lost in an agent to agent interaction. It is not intelligence, so stop calling it intelligence. What it is, it's a very clever way of advancing the capabilities of today's models. And when you look at the advancements of things like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, and the things that have really moved the needle in the so-called fanboy and fangirl community the last number of months, it's all about providing more context to models, not necessarily making the models, that much, bigger and more scalable. So anyway, that's why people are talking about it, and that's not going to go away.
So two quick reactions. One, I think we have to always remember how do we get to this point, and that is we have IT systems that were built to process transactions. They did not pick up all the attributes and data and everything else involved in whether any kind of like a decision or action. And that's why just looking at and crunching over the same old like system of record data is not going to help you solve this problem where you really understand things.
No, but the system of record data is part of what is needed in a lot of those cases, right?
Correct. It's part of what's needed, but you and I both know, how do you figure out if somebody's going to buy something from you or not? Sometimes it's just by looking at them across the table, and you can pick up all kinds of body cues and everything else, and they're not part of any transaction records, so you're not going to find it. I saw, in my second thing, a reaction point was I watched a software vendor about 3 weeks ago made a very good graphical way of explaining this problem. He showed a picture of a lion, and he goes, everybody know what this is? And it was a male African lion. And everyone, yeah, it was a lion. And then he goes, now, in context, if you saw this picture of this lion mixed in with some lionesses laying around on the savannah on the African plains, that's fine. But at the same time, he showed a lion standing in about 6 inches of water on the beach. And he goes, that is the wrong context for that image. You wouldn't ever find a lion in there. He goes, yes, you can find beaches. That's a legitimate picture, and that's a legitimate lion image, but you can't put the two together. The context is absolutely wrong for that. And he goes, and yet, there are no rules that help you understand that. It's almost like infinitesimally impossible to figure out every possible permutation of data points to bring it.
It is, but within an enterprise, you can start to think about in a particular area, like HR, what policies are important for the agent to refer to as the source of truth for the particular workflows it's responsible for. And that's where some of the action is around thinking about context in a fresh way. Now, why do I say context is not intelligence? It's because large language models lack a lot of the core characteristics of intelligence that I think I would defend. I'm not going to go into a long discussion of this right now because no one wants to have it. But for example, things like continuous learning, people will say it's always learning from you. No, that's not correct. What it's doing is it's storing information in some kind of a graph or vector engine for future reference. It's not learning. That's not continuous learning. Humans and animals continuously learn. Agents do not. Sorry. Also, handling uncertainty. A lot of agents are still struggling with the ability to say, I don't know the right answer to this question. Curiosity. Mm-hmm. Curiosity is an innate function of intelligence that agents don't have. Causality. I've been studying causal AI till my eyes bleed. It's different agents don't understand causal effects. You can try to teach them some of that, but they don't inherently understand it. So that's why context does not equate with intelligence. But to get back to Christopher's point here, everyone wants to talk context. No one wants to talk substrate. What kind of contextual accuracy can you have when your data is siloed, parsed by location instead of relationship, and not connected to the lexicon of operational reality with a canonical semantic model? And what Chris is saying here is definitely accurate in the sense that when you have data silos, then your ability to create the type of context you need is compromised. And Chris, what I would say is that you really need to tackle this on a role-based and a department-based level and look at where your silos are that impact those decisions and those workflows and face the music a little bit. And when you say no one's talking about substrate, I would disagree. Diginomica just put out a huge report on that. I just did a podcast with Rebecca Wedeman, who also did a big report on CX data and how fragmented it is. And some vendors, Brian, I don't know if you've noticed, are talking more about these data quality and siloed issues than they have in the past. Now, to what extent are they actually helping customers with that? I have a hunch you're going to have something to say about that during our halftime show. But the point is, I think the conversation is happening, Chris. It's just that the solutions are really not easy. But the point to make is that just freeing up your siloed data is not enough. You have to figure out how to give people the right information in the moment. And Brian, to your point, when you're talking with clients in a sales meeting and sourcing stuff on the back channel through Slack, you're not going to find that in an enterprise system. And that's what Foundation Capital is saying. And I actually agree with that part of their argument. Anyway.
Well, thanks to Christopher for getting John all wound up now. So let's see.
Yeah, Christopher, man, he did a great job here. I won't be able to do all your comments now, but I'll try to revisit them. You've already built the model. Yes, well, that's great. The one thing I don't really like, Chris, is someone who has quote unquote solved the entire problem. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I'm glad you're attacking the problem. The reason is I get these PR things all day long. Oh, here's the big problem. Oh, we've solved it. I push back a little bit against that, but I applaud the fact that you're trying to tackle it. Causality is a big one. Ask an agent if you should drive or walk the 50 meters to the car wash to wash your car. It will say walk. Yep, that's a classic example of lack of causal understanding. All right, I think we spent way more time on my first story than we needed to, but I think it is really important because you're going to be hearing context the rest of the spring on the keynote stage, and maybe that provided you with a little bit of context to understand your context, if you don't mind me running around in a loop. All right, Larry Dignan wrote a piece, Why Common Sense Needs to Be Your Algorithm. Brian, I don't know what you thought about this, but I really kind of like this piece because Dignan was basically saying, like, put your sexy, fancy tools aside and use some common sense on how you assess talent.
He's right. And I've been in that camp for quite a while. And I would argue you need common sense in the middle of every AI assisted process. That's that whole like human in the middle or human in the loop kind of idea. What terrifies me is that people pay that only lip service, or they don't have a plan in place on how they're going to create these super great people who are going to be able to apply common sense in resolving some of these kind of issues. You can talk till the cows come home about how we're going to train people and blah, 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 but yet still a lot of times certain calls have to be made based on other kind of factors rather than what's in a programmatic workflow. And I know people who, I was just reading a hellish story about some poor person who had they had a flight canceled for 2 or 3 days and just kept running into walls with AI chatbots that just could not handle those kind of situations. So yeah, we can't let the common sense walk out on this at all.
And just to read one paragraph that I really liked on this, Dignan, common sense would dictate that enterprise simply can't stop hiring college grads because you need to train and give employees experience. If you follow the mantra that AI is going to replace all entry-level work, you're going to have one gaping hole and no one to manage your company in just a few years. Critical thinking will die, and so will your company. That's an example of good old common sense, Brian.
Yeah, when I read that, I thought I could have written that paragraph. Yeah, he had what I thought was the quote of the day further back in that article. He said he was quoting our colleague Ray Wong, and Ray said, "The point that we've been making across the board is expertise is now the commodity, experience isn't. You can encode expertise into an software, but the experience is something that people often have to feel, touch, and live with for the rest of their lives." Anyway,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Christopher adds, far from solving the whole problem, my goal was to solve the first problem. Chris, I love that thinking, and kudos, and go after it because enterprises need your help. So that's great. Yeah, I had a slight problem with that. I really like that frame of like expertise is a commodity, but experience isn't. But in my view, you have to be careful there because I don't think human experts, subject matter experts, are a commodity at all. And I'm a little sensitive to that because I do a lot of workshops with young people, and they a lot of them are shying away from the appetite to develop expertise in something. It's just a matter of redefining expertise around like not just knowledge base but also relationships, networks, constantly testing your expertise in the real world. Domain experts matter, and sometimes they're the only ones that can identify flawed outputs from these models, which, by the way, when you encode expertise, you might have inaccuracies and
mhm.
and
And bias
yep,
and
and bias, absolutely. So human expertise that understands not just the problems, but Brian, to your point, the bias. I spent like 12 hours last weekend studying collider bias to understand how it is that we went like 2 decades thinking that smoking actually helped uh, underweight infants not be as likely to die, which was a fallacy that the tobacco industry exploited. And it was all about this lack of deep understanding of bias and what it means on decisions. And it's hard. And the people that really dig into that, I'm amazed by them because it took me 12 hours. I think I finally understand it, but I can't talk about that today because that's the end of this show. Brian, your top stories. What do you want to
yeah.
talk about?
Well, first, I want to make a plea to everyone out there. We need to start a Kickstarter fund for John so he can have some entertainment money and do
Yeah,
something with his life other than take AI
I
courses,
know.
read about AI, talk about AI.
I
All
know.
right. So, I'm going to talk about three pieces of litigation, actually. The first one is this lawsuit, interestingly enough, about people using note taking AI tools. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because every time I go to an analyst event, I can look to my left and to my right, and I'll see some analysts who are like me, have something like a Plod device or whatever that they're using to record the meeting and have it do the AI transcription. The problem that's popped up that this lawsuit is pointing out there is that some of these tools are scraping the contents of these conversations, whatever presentations, to better train the transcription capabilities. But they're doing so without the explicit permission of all the people that may be involved or being listened into. And when I think about that, I think about how many times I've been at, say, a briefing, a user conference, whatever, and the dictation technology is picking up all of the speakers. Maybe it was somebody who walked on stage, whatever, and I got to thinking, ow, is my tool creating some of this problem? Likewise, if you're using chat software like a Zoom or something, and using the encryption there, you're going to run into that problem. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting case because it's thinking about how this technology could be abused by a third party, and many people probably were never even thinking about that. So, it's an interesting one, and clearly one that's being flagged as something HR ought to watch. That's it.
Yeah, we need a little more help from vendors, I think, on what some of these flags are. But we're going to get to that during the halftime show, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah, Broham trying to convince himself he likes AI. Brent, if you ever read The Art of War, Brent, because that's really where I'm taking the playbook from. I also like Project Success, and it would be really nice if we could link some of these technologies to success stories. Let's do that. To be young and litigious, Brian, who's suing who?
To be young and litigious. There were a couple of suits that are out there right now. One involves Workday, and it's been alleged that their recruiting technology may be biased against older workers, and there's a big, heavy AI bent in there. Now, obviously, right now, where this case is at, it appears that, like in all these cases, both sides start initially firing off a number of motions to the judge, and the judge has basically already telegraphed in this one that he doesn't buy that the law doesn't protect a job seeker, for age discrimination. He said it does. It can't just be for active employees. So that one's going to keep grinding on through. And it's one to watch because age discrimination is definitely interesting. Because if we look at the picture on the left, the one with Meta is being sued by some former employees who got laid off late last fall. And there was some astounding data that these people got their hands on that talked about how much more likely an older employee is to be laid off versus a younger one. Now, there's always been a bad age discrimination or ageism problem in Silicon Valley. Some of the companies out there brag about having an average age of like 27. So you can't have that kind of an average age and stand there with a straight face and claim that you're not discriminating against older workers. But there are all these other things that are popping up, crawling out of the woodwork right now, like with all the AI-driven layoffs or layoffs being ascribed to AI being the cause. Some of the justifications that executives are making, well, older people won't relocate, or they're too settled in with wherever they live, or older folks are slow to embrace the new technology like AI, so we need to get rid of them, or older people are just too expensive with all their added seniority and their all the knowledge that they have in their heads. We can get 3 junior people for even less money than one of them. So we're gonna, this is not over with. This is a nasty kind of issue, and it's not going away. It's a big problem in the tech space. And just look at the layoff numbers we've seen lately.
Yeah, and I keep talking to vendors about that and telling them like the people are spooked by those layoffs, and you got to start talking about an more inspiring future. But Brian, to your point, while you were talking, I just did a quick check on when Weapons of Mass Destruction came out, which was 2016, which did a very superior job in documenting a number of problems with algorithmic screening, which included some of the hiring things you're referring to.
Yep.
You're looking for the book on your shelf there?
Yeah, I've got it. I think
somewhere up
just around the corner. But yeah, I was going to at least give the author a plug. I'm trying to remember her name. That was a pretty good book, actually.
Kathy O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you.
And by the way, Kathy O'Neill has a couple of really good talks on this topic on YouTube as well. She actually is part of an organization that advises companies on she basically audits their algorithms and helps them to remove bias from those algorithms. But bottom line is that this problem predates agentic and generative AI quite a bit. And in my opinion, nothing has improved at all since when she wrote that book. And I mean, at all. If anything, it's gotten worse. And that to me is very disappointing, because these technologies don't have to be used to exclude and discriminate, but it takes a lot of intentionality to apply the technologies, in my opinion, differently than that. And if you don't, then you're going to be hearing from someone's lawyer sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Brian. What else we got?
I got this one here on the act, the creativity, the creative act here. And This one was it got my attention, this article, because of just even the first couple of sentences really hooked me in. It goes, the thought I kept coming back to, because it explains what I see happening across SaaS right now and why most of it is going to age badly. Boy, that's the thing that gets me really focused, because what this is talking about is the ability to create software so cheaply by using AI. The author's warning us we're going to be drowning in a bunch of not so hot code. And what are we going to do with it? You know, we're going to have enough people to clean it, police it, stitch it together, and more. But more importantly, I think a lot of folks forget that the most expensive part of being a software vendor isn't necessarily the generation of new applications. It's all the maintenance of the long tail stuff. It's keep patching, upgrading. It's putting all, keeping all the compliance stuff correct. And then it's maintaining the stuff on behalf of customers and some of their weird requests. The long tail is a problem. And this article, I think, was a good way to remind us that the long tail's still there. Only with AI, we're going to have the ability to generate that, a quantum amount or a form factor more of code that's going to need this kind of care and feeding.
Yeah, and it's a really good time to have a discussion on what quality software engineers look like, because one of the fascinating things in the last couple of years is that while hiring for software engineers was down for a couple of years in the midst of the AI coding hype, now hiring for software engineers is back up again, according to several studies. And there's a lot of big reasons for that, including the fact that code generation is just a small part of how you create quality experiences that are compliant and clean. And unfortunately, in the meantime, what we're getting is a lot of system outages from vendors who have taken vibe coding too far. I'm not going to name any names such as Meta, Microsoft, and Google, but it's a problem. And if those companies can get into trouble with this stuff, then pretty much anyone else can too.
The excerpt here in the middle of this screen, or the left side of the screen, where it talks about when resources are finite, you have to choose, and choosing what is what your strategy really is. This is a really great, subtle but great argument the author made, in that when it costs a lot of money to write code, custom or package, you had to figure out how you were going to spend your money and capital wisely, because you don't have an infinite amount of that.
Bye, Clive. Good to see you here. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Clive. So we've got to be careful about this. But when you go to the other extreme, when there are almost no limits to who can jump in and become a programmer, the cost is virtually zero. It creates a whole different list of problems. And the author goes on later in the article to talk about how he's even dropped his Uber app and Zoom app or something. He's dropped a couple of them because the developers can now create so many features that the things are so bloated that he doesn't like using the applications anymore. Anyway, food for thought.
Yeah, definitely can have a longer discussion. I actually just wrote in my last hits and misses about the problems with Mythos and the supposed gains. The really interesting stuff there is to figure out how to create cleaner code, and I've had some interesting articles on that, including some of the work that Zoho has been doing, essentially figuring out how to take the code generated by AI and cross-check it through a bunch of different verifier tools and mechanisms to get that code a little bit cleaner, so that you're not having to go back in time and redo all your work again and again. But it is interesting, and there's an upside to it as well if you can figure out how to do it right. But to your point, I think you run into feature bloat, and it all goes back to the fact that what are we trying to do here in the end? I think we're trying to create better experiences for people to get their jobs done quickly and more effectively, or have a moment of connection or purpose or success in their world. And it doesn't seem like we're designing with that in mind right now. But that brings us to our halftime show, doesn't it? And we are at halftime, and so we're moving on from our article picks. And by the way, if you saw any stories this month that you want us to talk about that we did not get to, please pop those into the chat, because we are going to respond to every single legitimate, relevant comment that you put in the show. So, Brian, has, well, let's see, how do I put this? Brian has spirited discussions with software executives. And those executives know when Brian's in the room, they're going to have a spirited discussion. Isn't that so? And so, Brian, as a result of that, you have put together a slide deck, or at least a slide that I'm not sure vendors are going to be totally comfortable with. But this is tough love, Brian. So here we go. Give
All right.
give us your tough love.
So I'm not sure a lot of SaaS vendors today are going to necessarily survive or be as robust in the future as they were in the past. Here are the things I go looking for when I do a sit down with a big time software executive. My biggest problem right now are a lot of vendors are trying to couch AI as a mechanism to solve problems that the vendor should have dealt with, say, 10 years ago, but they're doing it now with AI technology. The problem with this approach is there's a pile of new problems that are even bigger that companies need help dealing with that vendors are completely ignoring. And I've had this conversation at least a half a dozen times in the last 5-6 weeks with software executives. And a classic in the HR area is they want to talk about making the workflow for processing an applicant or onboarding them to be maybe 5% more efficient. And they're talking about things that are going to save the company like 25 person hours a year. That's it. And I go, but what about the other drivers that are new, the things that are creating all the junk going into the application or talent acquisition process from the use of citizen AI tools out there? And it's like crickets chirping. They're solving yesterday's problems with newer technology, but they're not solving today's problems at all. That's one. I don't know. How many of these do you want me to cover, if any, John?
Shots fired. Yeah, I noticed this is kind of a dense slide. Are there are there any that are jumping out at you at the moment? Because I think you've raised a lot of key points here. Any others that you really want to hit on?
I will tell you that I've only had maybe 2 conversations with executives that talk a little bit about the data quality problem, but it's fascinating. Only one vendor has, owned up to the fact that it's a farce to think that systems of records actually have nothing but good data in them. And the classic, this guy had the same example I have used, which is I have a client who made 50 acquisitions in 30 years, and they had so many different ERP systems. A consulting firm came up with a new metric for that company called ERPs per employee. They can't really utilize AI until they get some of all this data variability and data hygiene kind of issue knocked out. And a lot of ERP vendors, they might acknowledge the problem, but they really don't have any solutions for it other than, well, you must migrate every customer to a single version in the cloud.
Weak, small, and unimpressive, says Brent. Yep, that's right in Brian's list there. Ouch. Hey, Greg. Yeah, that's fine, because now that you said you're lonely talking to yourself on YouTube, I think there was a bot with you on YouTube actually that you can interact with. But now that you alerted me to that, I know who you are here, and this is Greg. While Top Brass signs up on a new AI tool, the worker bees have to struggle with printers, logins, software updates, and other work interrupters that just keep showing up uninvited. I think, Brian, that's another interesting element here in terms of there's definitely a gap between how executives see AI, how CFOs and CIOs see AI, and how the rank and file experience it. There's definitely big differences there, and I don't think vendors are really speaking to that.
There's one in the middle there that I do want to call out, and that's this one that says not addressing not addressing function feature inflation by competitors and its impact on competitive differentiation. Let me explain. So I told one vendor recently that while they were doing other things with AI, they didn't notice that a couple of major players in the mid-market financial software space had basically upgraded the core financials to such a point that they were enterprise class in capability. So they now have way more functions, features, and powered capability than they ever had before. So I'm telling this to a mainline ERP solution provider, and I'm going, look at the financial modules inside your products today, and they look like Tommy rot kindergarten stuff compared to what competitors have. And I go, you have to upgrade the quality of your financial applications, and you may not have time to build it all out. You may have to swap something else in and then use all your new AI integration tools, whatever, to make it all happen. But right now they're losing deals because they weren't paying attention to how much better competitors have made several core areas, whether it's finance, HR, or some other applications, have just made them so much stronger. So that's what that point's about. And
I want to hit on a few more, if you don't mind. I want to add to your list, and then I'm going to provide a few like counter takes. But first, I want to pile on a little bit. Like, you've already got them on the ropes here. They're pretty much on the mat, I think. Let me just throw out a few more.
I'm going to take notes. Go ahead. I want to hear these.
I don't think vendors have done nearly a good enough job helping customers with making their implementations smoother and their interactions with vendors more seamless and easy. So in other words, why aren't they using AI to take out the friction that has existed in SaaS relationships that have frustrated customers? Friction in implementation, friction in contracts and licensing. Where's my real-time licensing dashboard and my recommendations on how to extend my license? Also, not enough help with data quality and data cleansing either. Granted, AI can't do those tools without the help of some domain experts and data analysts, but I don't see nearly enough help reducing the friction. And when you look at SaaS right now, Brian, I defend SaaS to a large extent against the idea that it's irrelevant in the age of agents. But the two weaknesses I see are excessive margins. In other words, companies that have gotten very comfortable with high profit margins in the SaaS environment, and also just not attacking the friction that still exists in these relationships that isn't really any better than dealing with an on-premise vendor. And AI, I think, is very well suited to help with things like streamlining contract experiences and stuff like that. Heck, a lot of startups are trying to do that in areas like mortgages and car purchases. Well, why can't we do that with software contracts and software licensing and software renewals and start delighting some customers here instead of talking with them about their flex credit options so that they can pay for extra tokens in order to do basic AI things that they thought were going to be included in your existing license. Shots fired again. So those are some of my issues. I've got a few more, but I'll stop there for a moment.
So for everyone who is with a company that uses application software, just know that, man, I did that shoe pounding on the table discussion in the middle there. There's something about failing to develop a low-cost mindset. I mean, come on, vendors, the writing's on the wall. You're going to headless agents will kind of make your UX invisible. No one's going to see your brand name anymore. But more importantly, if your competition can build applications using a lot of AI developmental tools, the cost of development is going to go down. The cost of sales should go down. The cost of software maintenance inside the vendor should go down. The literal cost of computing is going down, and yet there's still vendors trying to figure out more ways to separate more of your money and capital out of your corporate bank account without delivering an incremental stuff. The world's changing, and they need to start thinking of ways to not look at price increases as a way to hang on to customers. Customers are going to be seeking true love elsewhere, to quote Ann Landers, if they find a vendor just isn't adopting AI to help them reduce cost, improve service levels.
And I'll add two more things. They both have to do with transparent communications to customers. One is around AI pricing. I talked with a couple of vendors recently about, because they're having to adapt their pricing models because the costs of AI are still a moving target with the frontier models as well. And so you can get stuck in a tricky position with how to price this with your customers. And what I told them is, let customers know that. Don't try to pretend like you've got all the pricing figured out yet. Say you're going to be co-innovating with them on how to create affordable, effective use cases where the pricing makes sense, and we'll continue to tweak it so that it's predictable for you, but also gives you the value you're looking for, but also accomplishes things such as abusive systems with massive uses of tokens. For example, what happens if I have to send the same query to the agent 5 times to get the result that I want? Do I have to pay for it 5 times under your Flex credit plan? So the point is, there's a lot of things that have to get worked out with probabilistic transactions. So the transparency needs to be there. And also the transparency of the technical limitations. You talked about the problems with agent to agent communication, for example. Also the problem with the fragility of context that I talked about before. And behind the scenes, I'll talk with vendors about that and say, you need to discuss this with your customers. And so here's the rebuttal from vendors. Well, why? Why should I be more transparent? And here's your answer. Because whoever is more transparent is going to earn the trust. And when you earn the trust, you're going to be the core player along with whoever's providing the best user experience. And so the point is, you want to earn that trust, and you earn that trust by being a little more open. And I've talked with a couple of my friends in the consulting industry about that, and they love the fact that vendors are BSing about this stuff from the keynote stage, because they tell me when they go in and meet with customers, they're the ones that bring the reality check, and the customers appreciate it because they don't want to embark on failed projects. And so whoever's a little more honest about the limitations and how you architect a system with those limitations in mind is going to earn the business. So that's my argument for transparency. Anyway, Brian, we probably could add about 20 more to that list, but I think it's a pretty strong list for starters.
Yeah, I only got through 3 of those in a meeting with 2 CEOs. That's as far as we got. So I take time to figure out which ones I really want to hammer at that particular vendor. So I don't get to do the meltdowns quite the way you get to do. Mine aren't as public, let's put it that way.
But they're fun to watch, though, and I've had a chance to watch a few of them myself. And my favorites are by far when you grab the marker and head to the whiteboard yourself, and those are always my special favorite events. If you've never seen Brian take over a vendor session and take over the whiteboard, you haven't lived. Brian, I just want to counter you just a second, though, because I do think there's a couple things that I do like that SaaS vendors are doing, and I want to not all of them, but I want to put this out there. One of them is another mistake, but it's wrapped with something good inside it. One of the things SaaS vendors are getting right is they're taking a more responsible approach to AI as per the context architectures we were describing. When you look at the frontier models and the grossly irresponsible things they've done with public exposure of things like interacting around healthcare, interacting with therapy bots, interacting with counselors, interacting with sex bots, scams, all of that, all publicly exposed and unregulated. What the enterprise software vendors are doing to try to create a more responsible and governed version of AI, I absolutely applaud. And many of them have pretty good narratives around that. And I remember after a recent event, an analyst pulled me aside and we talked about the keynote, and they said that was a very adult discussion about AI. And so enterprise vendors at their best are having much more adult discussions. Now, that's not always the case. Granted, there's a lot of keynote excess and sales pitches, and I get that. But there's a more adult discussion going on, and I think that's good. There's another thing, which is that a lot of times modern software does deliver strong value to customers, and SaaS vendors make a huge mistake by not featuring those customers aggressively in keynotes in favor of their agentic AI carnival show. And so in many cases, there are really great customer stories, and I've seen some fantastic data quality stories in nonprofits, for example, working with vendors like Boomi. I've seen some fantastic process improvements working with vendors like Solanus and Signavio. I've seen some excellent business model flexibility stories with vendors that provide a lot of flexibility in how you can reconfigure your business for every single client out of the box. In an Acumatica show, I went to a standing room only workflow automation session. It had nothing to do with AI, but it was all about business users building these amazing workflows that are deterministic and reliable, and that can eventually be accessed by agents. And what you could do is you could fault vendors, perhaps. Oh, shop floor too. Shop floor robotics. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there that's not getting enough airtime because perhaps it's not sexy enough. But for manufacturers dealing with talent shortages and needing more smart automation, there's some great stories there. So what's the problem? I applaud the SaaS vendors who have those stories, and a lot of them do. You could quibble about the pricing and the margins, but there's some good value in some of these use cases. Why aren't they featured more would be my question, because a lot of times they don't get enough airtime, and that gives people like you sometimes the idea that there's no value being delivered at all, but it's not the case necessarily.
Well, a corollary to your argument there is, if you see enough vendor demonstrations this year, you keep noticing one thing. It's like vendors will spend 80% of their time talking about agentic AI. They'll spend 20% of the time talking about generative capabilities. And what gets zero time is that third leg of the AI stool, the algorithmic kind of AI technology. Yep. And yet, if I'm a business leader, I care a lot about tools that will do a better job of production scheduling, planning, forecasting, those kind of capabilities, and they're getting zero airtime. A customer prospect would think that the vendor has no capability in that area because of the dearth of demonstrations, talk time, whatever you want to use. But anyway, I think we need to remember there are three kinds of AI. We need to see all of that.
Yeah, and you could expand it further, right? Because you could argue that robotics and IoT have certain other sensor-driven components, computer vision. There's a lot of really, and a lot of times the most interesting things are actually hybrids of a lot of different forms of AI and analytics. And sometimes I find myself making arguments to people, hey, don't forget about the good old dashboard. Like, sometimes dashboards are incredibly useful, especially if they're making information accessible on the shop floor and stuff like that. The point being, like I think sometimes vendors can't get out of their own way when they have great stories to tell that justify a little bit about what they're doing, and yet they fall into these narratives all the time of like, we have to prove that we're doing all this next gen stuff. And finally, Brian, the other thing I would say is that, like, customers need to light a fire under themselves too, because I haven't run into that many customers that are really on fire and kicking ass this spring. I have found some, and those impress me, but I feel like a lot of them are more reacting to events than proactively rocking right now. And look, I have a lot of sympathy for that, because I feel like I spend every day trying to regroup and find my compass on how I should go forward. And so I know how difficult it is right now organizationally, but a lot of these customers right now, like when you look at some of the vendors that are really investing in AI infrastructure and stuff, one of the things they acknowledge is we're starting to get too far ahead of our customers. And so I think customers also have to start moving on this and not get overwhelmed by the data problems that they must address, but to figure out kind of a game plan for how they can do it in a way that's manageable, and also call on their vendors to help them with that. But I want to see customers a little more on fire, because a lot of my customer conversations aren't that energizing right now. Some of them are, I want to be clear, but a lot of them are not.
I've had a lot of calls lately with companies who are telling me, well, we're still on single tenant on-premise kind of technology. And of course, why? Well, we got a lot of customizations, whatever. Yeah, but hasn't the vendor end-of-lifed that product? Well, yeah, it's going to go away in like 2030. We're just hoping maybe they extend it. I go, why? And I keep doing that old consulting trick of asking why 5 times before you really find out what's really going on. I haven't been impressed with the way a lot of companies have been unable to even get started in a meaningful way around anything related to AI. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, we're dealing with inertia, folks. A body at rest will remain at rest. And unfortunately, Now we've got companies who, because they have so many, they may say that we're all standardized on some ERP like SAP, but you dig through the covers, you find out like, well, they actually have 3 instances running in different parts of the world, and they're configured a little bit differently,
Yep.
and the data definitions are a little different, and they've got some special tables in some locations than others, and they're not really standardized, and they've got a bunch of best of breed stuff
Yep.
and a whole bunch of
And
other
AI
junk.
and AI agents can't tell that shit apart.
Correct.
And that is the problem. Uh, Alan Berkson, I just gonna say hi, and also regarding messaging, Alan might be your dude. Alan just put out his corporate narratives book with Spacing Jeff Gomez, co-author. Worth checking out. I need to read the rest of it myself, Alan. I'm only a little ways in. I'm sorry, but I didn't know you were going to be here, so I wasn't ready. But feel free to weigh in on how we can get this messaging a little more authentic and a little more resonant. Because, like I said, Brian, I think the other thing that I've been talking with vendors about that wasn't on your list is where's the inspiration right now? Because with all the layoffs and all the job cuts, like where's your energizing vision of the future of work? Can we have an energizing future of work at this point? I'd like to believe we can, but I personally don't think most people wake up in the morning and feel that way. And it's gotten to the point where I'll go to an event, and even some of the people that are working with me at the event will pull me aside for job seeking advice and stuff. And it's like, oh crap, like everyone's like feeling like they might be next, and I don't think that's necessarily true from a capabilities perspective, but capabilities are not the only reasons why vendors do dumb things with their headcount. And so the point is, like, let's inspire people a little bit and make them feel like they have an energizing opportunity. I would like to hear more of that.
Well, as always, John always has to bring the trenchant commentary to one of these events.
Enterprise knowledge is about data hoarding, not sharing, so AI can't get their inputs for their models. I think it's a really good point that silos, right, are not just a data problem; they're a process and culture and people problem. And so, if you try to fix the silos without fixing your culture, then you're not going to go very far. So one of the most interesting aspects of AI, right, if you want to talk about what's good about the technology, is forcing those conversations internally, and I think that's healthy. And we have some whiffs.
So that picture over there about John's hotel woes, that actually is a sign in the Mandalay Bay Hotel, I believe,
Oh my god.
or at the Palazzo. Maybe that's at the Palazzo in Las
Wow.
Vegas. I can't believe it's so bad that so many people jumping up and down the elevators. They had to put signs up on it. But John, you didn't do too well this week on hotels. I'm not trying to rub it in, but I was in the St. Regis in Atlanta, and I think I did a better job than you when it comes to getting a great room.
That might be St. Regis right now asking you how your stay was.
It won't be your hotel.
No, there was no room at the inn for me. And
But you did fit in the manger. That's what I heard.
yeah, it was pretty fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think that the thing for me was it's not that often that you show up at a hotel and they basically not only don't have a room for you, but kind of treat you like you're an inconvenience. But I guess that's where we're getting to, Brian, in the world where humanity is sort of inconvenient to process flows. So they're like, yeah, why are you here? What? And I was like, I think you've heard of my client. They're a pretty big software vendor that we've all heard of. No room at the end. But anyway, the best thing was that I got the customer satisfaction survey, which was really awesome. And I was just looking for my verbiage on that. And I'm having trouble finding it, but I will find it in a minute. But one of the things that I really enjoyed the most about not having a hotel room was just saying like, hey, maybe you don't want to send me a customer satisfaction survey when you churn me away at night. It seems awkward. I was like, I'm thinking of writing you a love letter on TripAdvisor because they wanted me to publish the review, and I was like, I don't really think you want me to review that. Meanwhile, Paul McCartney got banned from Reddit for trying to post stuff about his own gig. So, Brian, man, no one's safe anymore, man. No one's safe from the algorithm.
So if Brett's still on the call, this is the kind of material that I'm sure his CX podcast would be all over. But anyway, well, the good news is, like I said, I had no problem with my hotel because I've learned, and I was telling John about this a few days ago, that the best service I've been getting lately always comes when I'm wearing a sport coat and tie. And I know John would rather probably hang himself than be caught dead wearing those things. But man, I've been bypassing TSA queues and
you even got an employee discount at an airport restaurant, man.
Yeah, they gave me an airline employee discount. Yep. So
so that's the big lesson here is you gotta suit up if you want the express treatment these days.
Dress for the experience you want, not for the experience you get.
By the way, there's a couple more notable lists we didn't get to, but one of them was I don't know if you saw this one, but the webinar TV scraping Zoom meetings and then publishing them live. So check that out and take appropriate precautions in your Zoom meetings. They found webinar TV meetings in there of like private meetings of people in recovery, for example. And it's one of the sleazier business models that you've run into in a long time on the web. And finally, by the way, there's another whiff, but I don't know if it's a whiff or not because it's about the shoe company. Did you hear about them? No. It was called All Birds Shoe Company. They pivoted to AI, and their shares soared 580%. So anyway, Brian, maybe that's what we should be doing. Is that a whiff or not? Is that a whiff? I don't know. 580%. That's pretty good.
Well, let's see. Let's check back on that in about 6 to 9 months. Find out if the shareholders are still getting something.
Something that inspires, creates value. It's something that barks. Something that barks during the show.
Yeah, that's our newer German Shepherd, but the picture is about a year old when she was only maybe 8 months old. I just thought I'd update the photo from what we've had in prior events.
Hey, Greg, just real quick, in case it's useful to anyone else, you say subscribe here. YouTube notifications aren't so awesome either, but pro tip on LinkedIn, if you get an invite notification, and I try to remember to invite you, click that you're attending the show and then look for the add to calendar thing and literally add it to your calendar. I know it's an extra step, but that's sort of the only way to get a guarantee that you'll be here because the algorithms have decided that they may or may not let you know about the show. Sorry about that. It's a universal problem. It's not specific to the Enterprise Month in Review. Brian, we have a bunch of shows to go, so we're going to have a whole lot more to say and probably some interesting guests to join us. But as for today, what inspires and creates value?
Well, I've got my answer is a little atypical. Southwest really wants my business back, and I want to see if they're going to inspire me and create value for me and them. And so they're on kind of double secret, top secret, whatever, probationary status with me at the moment. And I know that's your favorite air carrier, but
thanks for that. Yeah.
I heard you use the same survey for Southwest that you do with that hotel that had no room for you. But anyway,
all I can tell you, Brian, is until you get some pistachios served to you on the flight, you haven't really achieved much status in the new Southwest. So, so you can judge yourself by the mixed nuts as usual. Yeah, I was trying to think of what inspires me at the moment in time. But one thing that I will say is the I'm really feeling like these kinds of formats are the right formats right now, like the podcasts, the video discussions, like try to make sense collectively of what we're seeing in real time really works. And I just encourage people to seek out these kinds of discussions because I don't think this is an environment where we can kind of put it together on our own. And so I think that's one reason why I'm feeling a renewed interest in my multimedia things, because it's not so much, oh, let's go viral with some clips. It's the chance to, you know, uh, I didn't know exactly what you would say to things I had to say today. And it's that banter along with the audience that makes me smarter. And in return, I feel like I can then go in front of some executives and get some real answers and hopefully share that with customers and hopefully create a virtuous circle where maybe we have a little more understanding of what we're going through. So anyway, that to me is what I'm honing in on right now, is like writing articles is great too, because it helps to get my head together. But like, I think it's the collective discussions with people that I respect and that challenge me. So anyway, that's go find your peeps is what I'm saying. Don't go through it alone, and don't go through it with your Claude bot giving you all the answers. Like, go find some peeps.
On that note, I would add, I'd love to actually help put two people together that maybe didn't know each other previously, but could really throw a lot of value each way. Just this afternoon, I connected a long-time Workday and Plex user customer to a old client of mine who's looking to get new software. They don't know each other, but they will, and they may actually visit each other's manufacturing operations to see where the new synergies can come by moving the one company moving to a more digital future. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I don't make any money on it. I don't do it to make money on it. I do it because it's not just that it's the right thing to do, but I always felt that my job is to always provide a fiduciary kind of relationship with my clients and to help. If you can't help people, or you're so thin-skinned that you won't lift a finger unless somebody is putting a shekel in your hands, then what good are you on this earth anyway? So anyway.
I like that. Definitely. You actually did that for me this week. I had a talk with a researcher that you put me together with. And along those lines, I think it's also a really good time to look in on people who may be in career transitions of their own. It gets a little lonely out there when you suddenly don't have a gig.
Or
And,
health problems. Yep.
Yep. Or health issues. So it's a great time to look in on your peeps as well. So let's do that. Whether or not it's an inspiring conversation, sometimes it's a necessary one, which is how are you doing? And with that, let's go get some more material from the road, and we'll see you all in a few weeks' time or what have you for another round. Thanks a lot for all your comments today. You did a great job of keeping us on point, and nice to see some new faces too. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.